Hello, and my name's Chris Taylor, and today I'm going to read the first part of one of my favourite books. It's called The Mousehole Cat. It's written by Antonia Barber and beautifully illustrated by Nicola Bayley. At the far end of England, a land of rocks and moorland stretches itself out into a blue-green sea. Between its high headlands lie tiny sheltering harbours where the fishing boats hide when the winter storms are blowing. One of these harbours is so small, and the entrance between its great stone breakwaters is so narrow, that fishermen called it the Mousehole. The people who lived in the cottages around the harbour grew fond of the name, and they call their village Mousehole to this day. They say it in the Cornish way, Mousehole, but you may say it as you choose. Once there lived in the village a cat whose name was Mauser. She had an old cottage with a window overlooking the harbour, an old rocking chair with patchwork cushions, and an old fisherman called Tom. There's Mauser and Tom. Can you see the sea in the background? Mauser had had many kittens in her time, but they'd all grown up and left home. Her eldest son kept the inn on the quayside. It was noisy and smoky, and his man had once spilled beer on Mauser's head as he was drawing a pint, so she didn't go there very often. Can you see there? The beer falling on Mauser's head. She really doesn't look very happy, does she? One of her daughters kept the shop on the corner. It was busy and crowded, and her lady had once stepped on Mauser's tail as she was weighing out some vegetables. So she didn't go there very often either. Sometimes Mauser felt that her children had not trained their people properly. There we go. Can you see that big foot about to land on Mauser's tail? Ouch! Or should that be meouch? Her own pet, old Tom, was very well behaved. He never spilled the cream when he was filling her saucer. He always stoked the range to a beautiful golden glow. He rocked the rocking chair at just the right speed. He knew the exact spot behind her left ear where Mauser liked to be tickled. What was more, he never wasted his time drawing pints of beer or weighing out vegetables. When he was not looking after Mauser, he passed the day in the most useful way possible. He took his little boat through the narrow opening between the great breakwaters out onto the blue-green sea and caught fish for Mauser's dinner. So there's old Tom with a bowl of cream for Mauser. And there's some of the boats setting out on the blue-green sea. Mauser was very partial to a plate of fresh fish. In fact, she never ate anything else, but she liked a little variety. So on Mondays they made morgie broth, Mauser's favourite fish stew. On Tuesdays they baked hake and topped it with golden mashed potatoes. On Wednesdays they cooked kedgeree with delicious smoked ling. On Thursdays they grilled fairmaids, a mouth-watering meal. On Fridays they fried launces with a knob of butter and a squeeze of lemon. On Saturdays they soused scad with vinegar and onions. And on Sundays they made stargazy pie with prime pilchards in pastry. All in all, Mauser's days passed very pleasantly. And there's Tom cooking, I don't know, probably fish stew. And there's Mauser looking on. Can you see lots of fish and bits of fish lying around in that picture? Then one year there came a terrible winter. At the far end of England, the blue-green sea turned grey and black. The great storm cat is stirring, thought Mauser as she watched at her window. The wind whined like a wild thing about the high headlands. It came hunting the fishing boats in their hidden harbours. When the great storm cat is howling, thought Mauser, it's best to stay snug indoors by a friendly fire. The sea drew itself up into great giant waves and flung itself against the great breakwaters. All along the coast of Cornwall the stone walls stood the shock. Then the sea sucked up its strength again and roared right over them, sinking the sailing boats in their home havens. But it could not get into the Mousehole. Mauser watched as a great storm cat clawed with his giant cat's paw through the gap in the harbour wall. But it was too small. He snarled and leapt up at the great breakwater under the lowering sky. But it was too high. The fishing boats sat safe as mice in their own mousehole, but they could not get out. Can you see that claw trying to reach into the fishing boats through the high breakwaters? Goodness me, what an amazing story this is. And because the fishermen could not get fish, there was no more food. They ate up the few vegetables that were left in their storm-racked gardens. They ate up the salted pilchards that were left in the cellars. Mauser hated vegetables, and the pilchards were too salty for her taste. But soon there was nothing left. The cats and their people grew very hungry. Mauser sat by her window staring out at the storm. Can you see her in that picture staring out at the storm? And she thought longingly of morgie broth and stargazy pie. Every day the fishermen gathered on the quayside, and sometimes they would try to take a boat out through the Mousehole, but always the great storm cat lay in wait for them, and they were lucky to escape with their lives. Now that's quite a tricky picture, but can you see Mauser looking out of the window and the boats trying to get out through the Mousehole in the background there, and the big storm blowing them back and the big waves keeping them in? I wonder if you can make out the great storm cat's whiskers in that picture. I'll hold it there for a moment longer. Don't worry if you didn't. You'll see them again soon. Then at last, one evening, as old Tom sat with Mauser on his knee, she felt him take a deep sigh. "Mauser, my handsome," he said, for he was a courteous and well-spoken man. "Mauser, my handsome, it'll soon be Christmas, and no man can stand by at Christmas and see the children starve. Someone must go fishing come what may, and I think it must be me. It cannot be the young men, for they have wives and children, and mothers to weep for them if they do not return. But my wife and parents are dead long since, and my children are grown and gone." Mauser purred to tell him that she understood, for it was the same with her. "I shall go out tomorrow, Mauser, my handsome," said the old man, "and I shall not come back without a catch." Mauser purred louder to tell him that she would go with him, for he was only a man, she thought, and men were like mice, in the paws of the great storm cat. There's old Tom talking to Mauser, and Mauser purring back. It all looks very serious, doesn't it? Well, it is very serious. Besides, she knew that if he did not come back, she would not much care to live in her cottage without him. There'd be no one to pour the cream, or stoke up the range, or rock the rocking chair. There would be no one in all the world who knew just where she liked to be tickled, behind her left ear. "Tomorrow night, Mauser, my handsome," he said, "we shall eat morgie broth, baked hake, lingen, launces, fair maid, souse scad, and stargazy pie." Then Mauser purred as if she would burst, to tell him that she loved him more than any of these things. The next morning they set out very early, before the others were waking. Before they went, Tom stoked up the old range and damped it down so that it would burn steadily until they returned. Then he hung a lamp in the window so that it would shine out across the harbour and light their way. As they reached the quayside, Mauser looked back through the wind and rain and thought how warm and welcoming the window looked. Can you see the light on in the window as Tom and Mauser set out? Soon their little boat was crossing the harbour towards the Mousehole Gap, and the voice of the great storm cat rose all around them like a giant caterwauling. And as she listened to his wailing, Mauser felt a sudden strange sadness for him. How lonely he must be, she thought, endlessly hunting the men-mice in the deeps of darkness, and never returning to the rosy glow of a red-hot range. And her kind heart was moved to comfort him. That's the end of part 1, and I will read part 2 to you tomorrow. Stay safe. God bless you.